Howdy campers, welcome back. What do we have today? We have redemption. So, and a very, very exciting, thrilling lesson in junkyard economics, but hang tight for that. We got today, ran up there, had an hour and a half, I think, before I had another appointment at 6. We got from that Rover V8, which is the quote-unquote wrong engine, still, all the same, we were able to get all these goodies, and foreshadowing, an extremely good price. What are these, you ask? So we have drivers, well, I marked them because I plan ahead. There it is. Sorry, just stared at the concrete. Driver's side rocker arm, passenger side rocker arm. These are from 1999, have I don't know how many miles on them, but really considering what they are, just based on color and the spring tension and the tolerance, this is pretty good. Certainly, it's a world of a lot more than nothing, and it is infinitesimally better than spending, I believe. So you can buy each of these parts. It's a lot more than it looks like because you have different size springs, you have different size washers or shims, the rocker arms themselves. You can get aluminum, you can get steel. There's different generations with different oiling ports. All that to say, these are complete. These are going to work on this engine. These are $600 to $1,000 for a populated rocker arm assembly for one. And we got both of them. These are the push rods for Rover V8. They are standard over a huge range, and they, on the hood of the Range Rover, they all passed the roll test. Where do these go, you might ask? Let's take a little walk, shall we? Coming over to our cylinder head, which I just confirmed for the first time now. Cylinder head is the exact same part number as the 99 Range Rover, so that is groovy. And we get a good view on this because the intake manifold is out. So where do these go? These go into this slot here and sit in the hydraulic lifter. There. We have our second one here. Numero due. So this is a single camshaft versus most traditional modern engines have a double overhead camshaft, which actually sits on top of the cylinder head. This is old-fashioned. The blueprint for this engine is from 1955, and they used it until 2004. That is cool, but maybe not the best practice on the various British manufacturers that use this. Anyways, they did improve upon it. This is probably 95 to literally this 97, 98, I think, is probably the best iteration of it. That's in my experience, that's my opinion of it. Anywho, back to the important stuff. What you can kind of see down here, these are the lobes of the camshaft. They have pine needles and mouse poop on them, but that just happens, just as it happens. It is back behind here where it slides in. The lobes on the camshaft are they're not circles, obviously. They're elliptical. So there's a high point. One side of it is round and one side of it protrudes out. As the side that protrudes out lifts the, I should grab this one's moving here. So the camshaft lobe pushes the lifter up like that. It's got a small range of motion. As you can see, there's a little bit of a shoulder. So that's as high as it goes, and that's as low as the cam will let it go. Obviously, this one here is pretty much at the bottom of the stroke. All that to say, we have our valves here. You have an exhaust valve and an intake valve. From here, I'm not sure which is which. Oh, I do know. Exhaust port here. This goes to your exhaust manifold, out your tailpipe. This is your exhaust valve. Intake valve. So this is your fresh air, which goes airbox, shoop-de-doo, whoop-de-bow, whoop-de-bow, wham-ba-lam, into your intake manifold. Intake manifold draws it in here, mixed with your fuel. The fuel is injected on the fuel rail here, which, gosh, I wish I had a lower intake manifold to show you, but fuel is injected here, mixes with air, atomizes, is sucked in by vacuum produced by the piston drawing down, port here, intake manifold. Your timing, if you've heard about it, is dictated by the timing chain here, which matches your crankshaft and your camshaft. And the crankshaft determines the position of the piston, big honker underneath the cylinder head. The upper timing gear dictates your camshaft, which dictates the operation of your valves, which allow for combustion, intake, compression, exhaust. So, excuse me, we've got our valves here, got our push rods here, and then just like Lego for adults. Don't trust me, I'm an expert. There we go. As you can see here, these are torqued pretty high because as you can see here, what you need is the downward pressure onto, it just lines up so well. The downward pressure here, once you do that, you can watch the rocker arms actually shift based on the position of each of the push rods. So there you go. That's a rudimentary V8 basics for you. And you're starting to get an idea where, you can buy these push rods. You can get, so they're 8-cylinder engine. You have 16, 2 valves per cylinder. So 16 of these, that puts you at about $130. That's not a big deal. It's money. And actually, if I really take a look at these, it's probably not a bad idea to replace them. But this engine is just one massive box of uncertainty. I can't even do a compression test on it properly. So for all I know, it's just, I'm going to put all this time and money into it anyways. But we're not addressing that. We had none of these. We now have them. That's what I'm going with. So those, that's $130 just for a couple pieces of metal. That's an understatement, but that is what it is. As I said, these, each of these is going to run you $5, $10, $15, depending on the material you get. You also have to buy the springs. You also have to buy the spacers. You also have to buy the rocker arm. This altogether, like I said earlier, that's $600 to $1,000 new. And if I'm buying a used one, I'm taking the same risk of just using this thing. And like I said, it was a Range Rover. It was the engine, it looked like it had been maintained. It had good parts on it. A lot of times you get these things and there's just, too close. Just 30 pounds of grease sitting on it, and you pop off the valve covers and these things just look like they were sitting in a coal mine. This is pretty good. For unknown mileage, vehicle from 1999 in a junkyard, just literally by color, this tells you that it at least periodically had oil changes. So that's great. And then the same thing here. These are, I didn't want the intake manifold. I think the guts of it, the aluminum may actually fit, but the greater intake manifold is not going to work on this unless I do a ton of research and I force myself to go back a third time. I don't think it's going to work. But each of these, I don't know, a couple bucks for each of these. These are OEM specific captive washer intake manifold bolts. I am one short. I'm supposed to have 2 of these because there's a huge bracket. Well, I'll show you where this goes, actually. The last intake manifold bolt of the shorties is here. This one went kind of around here. And it had a twin on the other side. This exact bolt went somewhere in here. Its twin lived right about here. And there's a huge aluminum bracket that holds your alternator, your air compressor pump, and your power steering pump, all in this area. There's this massive, like probably 10-pound aluminum just block that sits here. And I was cranking, and it was a ton of work. I got the whole intake manifold, the upper intake manifold off, got everything exposed. I still had the fuel lines and fuel injectors in the way, but all that to say, this one, I had, it sits about here. I got it about this far out, and it literally hit the top of that bracket. And I think there was probably, this is a good example. So I backed out from here to here, and this little part was still in there, but it was hitting the upper bracket. So, just how it goes. I could have spent another half hour there and got this whole bracket off, but I'm doing this after work, running up here, before the junkyard closes, so got to track down one of these. But then, I'm spending a couple bucks for this bolt versus however much I would have had to spend for all of these. And then these, again, are very heavy duty. These are very specific bolts to be held to a certain torque for that. So I got all 8. What I'm actually going to do is, in the interim, I'm going to put all of this hardware, down here, all of this hardware in the cylinder head for now, just to sit, because then when I do, when I do finally pull it out, I will put it in a bag and I will label it, because that's what I do, and that's what the person before me should have done. Anyways, and then, once again, we're going to get to those. These are, I don't know, they're basically part store plugs, but if you remember, I'll just show you real quick. Spark plug wires are cheap, and you know what, I might even, for the price I paid, I might even just get other ones. But, there, look. Got it. This does not give me a lot of confidence in the condition of the ones that came with it. So if nothing else, I paid $1 each for the spark wires in the junkyard. And I'm calling, just at a glance, I'm telling myself they're better than these. So, there you go. Look at this. We're putting it together. Good work, team. There's a small chance that just based on that other intake manifolds configuration and the ignition control module coil situation, I mean, these might be a tiny bit short, tiny bit longer, I don't know. Rover V8 within a year of what we were looking at. So that was a gamble. That brings me to, take off my glove. Oh, and once again, this is why I had to, friendly finger, this is why I had to come back a second time. 8mm bolt, not a big deal. If you have a 6-point socket, no, it's not a big deal. But if you have a 12-point socket, a 6-point 8mm is just not going to cut it. So, had to make a second trip because of one piece of hardware. But you know what? This was a great trip. Got all this stuff. How much did I pay, you ask? Well, you remember how much it cost to get a couple of hinges and a dipstick. Rocker arm assembly, 2. $14 each. Extended price, $30. Engine parts, push rod, $1 each, $16. Miscellaneous electrical spark plug wire, 8 of those for $1. That is a screaming deal, assuming they work. Which, there's a good chance. Oh, another side note. This is a little side note. Stop saying when people do a tune-up and they do cap plug rotors, cap plug plugs and wires and rotors, that is so rarely, if that's just a standard tune-up, those are all serviceable parts, but I shudder to think how many sets of plug wires and caps and rotors have been thrown away. There is perhaps a couple thousandths of an inch of buildup on a cap or a rotor, generally speaking, that can cause you ignition issues. You can scrape it off with a screwdriver or a penny and get the exact same results. That's end of my rant. If something's broken, fix it. But if you're just doing a tune-up for the sake of it, those are actually probably going to go before a cap and rotor, and people will change out a cap and rotor every 5,000 miles if they're misdiagnosing another issue. Anyways, end of my rant. Sorry, there's going to be a lot of that if you like what you're seeing. So, spark wires, $1. Miscellaneous accessories, hardware, maybe? Okay, and then here's my return. So this is my $20 back, which is awesome. And they actually kind of threw that one in because, sure enough, the young lady kind of did her own thing on this one. But the fellow that I was working with today, he kind of threw me a bone, actually, and said, well, I brought back 4 pieces. He said, well, that's only 2, but we'll count that as 2. And then just to be nice, he basically threw that in. So I paid $46 for that. Got $20 back. I ended up at $30. So here's where junkyard economics come in. And I could, I probably will do a video separately on this, just on the economics of used vehicles, because I'm a nerd. But the replacement, MSRP, replacement value for this stuff, new from the dealer, maybe this is 60, 70, 80 bucks. But as I just went through, if I had to buy these new, I'm not even going to try and do the quick maps, but a spark plug wire set, that's probably, depending on where you get it, 30, 40, 50, 60, maybe even like 80 bucks for an NGK, really nice set of spark wires. As I said, these are $600 to $1,000 each. I looked them up last night. That is from Rimmer Bros and Atlantic British. A lot of people just don't even have them in stock. Rimmer Bros actually had them in the UK, 600 bucks for an aftermarket entry-level one. These, it's just hardware, but maybe $3 or $4 a bolt for these, maybe 1 or 2 for these. And I actually have these in my cart. They're $1 to $2, not a big deal. A set of 16 of those is $110 to $130. I looked that up. If you're really going top dollar, that could be $2,000 of parts, but they charge me $30 for it. So it's just really interesting. They're running a business. They can set things up however they want. But you think of actual replacement cost, availability, a lot of the value for something comes in getting it here and now, convenience, manufacturing tolerances, all that funny stuff goes into it. But like I said, this has already run long for just a quick parts update. So there we go. I went from a pretty bummed out point yesterday to being able to put a couple parts in, and I'm actually going to put them in so they're at least sitting in here so I can keep track of them. But yeah, there you go. I still got to go through those goodies there, and then this, now that I've kind of committed to doing something with it, is going to go in the garage, do some shuffling around, and just start tidying stuff up and get my parts order, and then that'll be it. So thanks again for listening to my little goofy diatribes on this stuff. But if you like what you see, there's going to be more of it. So thanks, guys. Okay, one last update real quick. I just put these pieces together. You can see how much of a difference now, even just mentally, we are that much closer. I didn't put the push rods in. I'm actually just going to bring them inside and put them in the ultrasonic cleaner first thing. So you can see here's the action on these. Nice satisfying click. But you can see how that, just not every single piece that I can get secondhand on the side locally that I can stick on this is mentally makes a huge difference. This is the one I was talking about. So all the bolts line up. This is the only one. You can see how much taller it is here on the intake manifold. It's actually basically double the thickness, and it kind of steps up. But another interesting thing to note is this is neither an intake nor an exhaust. This is a coolant port. And look at the bolt hole here. Look at that line. I don't know if this has had head gaskets before. I kind of assume so, just because this generation of Land Rover tends to get them every 50,000 miles. But coolant port here, clearly bleeding into this bolt hole. The same on the other side, but not nearly as much. And you can see some of these from the vehicle that I got these out of today. There's a little bit of rust on that one as well. Obviously there's corrosion, but because it's the same story here, you have shorter bolts in the back, but they're also on a water port. And sure enough, that coolant is creeping out in both directions just a little bit. Obviously not as bad on this vehicle. On this one, that's pretty noticeable. You can see it. You probably, if you look closely, would have seen it coming all the way out from under the intake manifold gasket. Excuse me. But yeah, once again, the push rods I now have, rocker arms for both sides I now have, and the rocker bolt hardware, and the intake manifold hardware, and an extra set of plugs. So we're not out of woods yet. We still have this entire thing to populate. But if we were to, like I mentioned earlier, if I just ignored that I don't have the parts, popping the heads off, both heads off, doing the head gaskets, cleaning everything up, making sure that the heads are actually good. And you know what? If I need to get new heads, they're still in the junkyard as of today. I think these heads will be okay. We'll find out. We'll find out together. But little bits, bit by bit. And the dipstick. You know what? That's just great. That's great. So glad we have that.